All right, today we're going to talk about thermostats on Volkswagens.
Now, I would want you to know I can't really give you any advice on this, but I'll just tell you what I do and why I use them or don't use them. Back in the early 80s, I don't know how many cars we saw come into the shop with bad thermostats. And what would happen is you'd get the car into the shop and it would just be this smell. You knew right away. It'd just be the smell. You'd open up the deck lid. Oh, bet the thermostat stuck. You go underneath the car, and the bellows would be. I think they're shut this way, and then they expand as it warms up, and then the thermostat opens. And we would see them in the shop. I don't know how many engines that we got. I guess it was towards the 80s because, they only last so long, and eventually the thermostat finally gets to a point where it doesn't work and it sticks. It doesn't open. So the flaps would not open in the engine, and it would just burn it up. Basically, your air would not be able to go through the shroud into the engine. This thing has little flappers. I was looking for them. I still can't find them, but they went on the bottom of the fan shroud here. And then there was this thing here that would, I forget what it did. It hooked up, as I don't run them very often. And that actually was operating the flaps, and then this would run the linkage to them, and they go along the bottom here of the engine. So you got to look at, this is how I look at this, and in Southern California, your engine warms up so quickly. We don't have any time very often where you drive, and I don't drive my car when it's below 40 almost ever. And, and I think at this point, a lot of us are just summer drivers. I mean, if you're driving it daily through the winter, the car's probably not going to last very long. It's going to go through some rust issues if you're in a place where it gets cold enough. In Southern California, or in most of California, you can drive any time of the year and never have it cold enough for the thermostats to really do something. Now, on your water-cooled engine is not really like the air-cooled with a thermostat. So your water-cooled engine, because water takes a long time to warm up, it literally, you really need a thermostat in your car with water, because it'll never really ever get warm. It's always going to be like really, really cold, even in the summer. And the thermostat in a water-cooled engine helps to regulate the flow of the water going through the system so that it can stay in the radiator longer, so that it actually cools it off, and also it stays in the block longer so that it transfers the heat from the steel or cast iron or aluminum or whatever to the coolant. If it goes through the engine too quickly, it never gets a chance to do its job and dissipate the heat from the engine to the radiator. In a water-cooled engine, it is very necessary to have a thermostat. In an air-cooled engine, most people in California do not run them. And this is the reason why, is because in the 80s, we really had a ton of them come in the shop with a cooked engine because the thermostat stuck. And, if you put a new engine in a car, there's no way you could warranty it, if you put the thermostat in there, because if it's stuck, then you'd end up buying an engine for somebody. And so we stopped running thermostats. I mean, I'm saying somewhere in the 80s, and we never had issues. So I'm going to explain to you about why we think that that's okay. Because all the thermostat does is it helps warm your engine up a little quicker. So what it does is it cuts off the air to the cylinders and makes it so that no air goes through the cylinders until they reach a certain temperature when this thing opens. And when those cylinders reach that temperature, they open nice and slowly, and then after that they're open. When it's warm enough, they're open. So that's all it does. It doesn't regulate and open and shut unless you're in an ultimately cold climate. And then, that's when you may consider running them when you're in a place where you're in the snow or in the below freezing temperatures and things like that. That's when it really would be beneficial to have. But most places, if you're in a climate, I would say above 40 degrees, you're probably going to be your thermostat's going to open, and then it's going to stay open the entire time. So really what that does is it keeps your engine from running too cold. So if you're just driving it in and out of the garage all the time, what would happen is you would get some fuel might go down your rings or something like that and end up in the crankcase from running it too cold all the time. And again, we're not having that problem because within 2 or 3 minutes or so, the engine's at an operating temperature that's warm enough that it, isn't going to do that. So when you're in 50 or 60 degrees or more, when it's 40, it might take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes, something like that, of running or driving it. And then after that, then it's at full operating temperature, and it's not going to do any damage to the engine. So again, the reason we stop running them, they stick and have problems. I get to guys that say all the time, I've never seen that. I don't know where you worked, okay, but every mechanic I know that's worked on these VW air-cooled engines, everybody that I know here, we all have seen, and you can make your comments on this, you've seen engines overheated with a stuck thermostat. If you've done this for any period of time, if you did it for a year in Southern California, we saw them stuck with burned up, all the time. So to me, it's a risk-benefit thing. If I put it in, the benefit is going to be that it warms up in a minute or two. It's also it's going to work better as far as warming up. So you're going to start the engine, and the choke is going to be turning off as the time the thermostat's opening, and it will run a little bit better when it's really, really cold. Okay, and it might not stall. Like sometimes when you start up your old VW, you start up the engine, and as it's coming off a choke, it's not quite warm enough, and the engine wants to stall and stuff like that. You might not have that issue. Like I have a thermostat in my 36 horse. I just didn't want to take it out. It was working fine, so I still have it in that. And it warms up just a little bit quicker. And I'm going to tell you some other alternatives for you guys that are running that don't have a thermostat that you can do that will give you the same principle. If it was really cold out and I didn't have a thermostat in my bug or bus, I'd cut a piece of wood the size of the fan, like large enough for here that you could put in front of the fan so it wouldn't suck air. Run your engine for a minute or 2 minutes, 3 minutes or whatever till it's warmed up, and then slide the piece of wood over to the other side. That's an alternative. That's your own manual thermostat that you can do, because all it does is get it to operating temperature. Once it's at operating temperature, these engines have more of a problem running hot than they do running cold. So that's why I say no thermostat's okay. And again, you can listen, do it your way, whatever, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm just telling you what I do. So here's another thermostat. I just found, and I have one of these. Forget what these are for. 30. Oh yeah, so there's this thing here that also goes on there. That's part of it. I'm remembering how to do it now. It's been a long time since I've run one of these. This goes through the case. Then this thing goes on here. And this goes over here. So yeah, that's how that goes. Anyway, this thing goes through the case right there. Really a pain in the butt to get them all on and working, to me. I mean, the hassle factor as well as putting it together. It's much easier to put one together without a thermostat. Well, another quick thing I wanted to cover is some people say that when you have the thermostat flaps on there, it helps direct the air better through the heads. I don't really agree with that. No. That's just my opinion. But putting the thermostat flaps on there and having them go one direction, they say can help direct the air towards the head better. If you look, there's a divider right here in this one. And this side, there's no divider. Could it help cool off number 3 better? I doubt it. I really don't think it would really make any difference. I'd be interested to see if somebody's actually done a test before and after. We did before and after on these, and definitely got a cooling, a significant amount of cooling better by using these rather than the stock deflectors. And that was based on head temp, not based on, we don't know what cylinder temp is. Didn't really have a way to test that, but head temp was lower when we had these on it, which is your most critical temperature in your engine, being that the fire actually happens in the head. So anyway, we did find out that it ran cooler back in the 80s. We did a test on that. I'd be interested in seeing head temp differences with the, some guys weld them open. I really don't. I don't think it would really make a significant difference. I think it would be just, I mean, if you have those in there, it's just one more thing to restrict flow of the air, you know. So it's, to me, it's like, how could that make it better by directing it in the right direction when the fan just blows out of this hole? Either way, I don't know. I don't think it would do anything. That's just my opinion. But anyway, I decided to put it in here too. So anyway, I don't usually run them. The only reason I would is if I was in a colder climate and I was driving a lot in the winter. If it's an occasional drive every once in a while, there's always the put a piece of wood, slide it over method. Yeah. But just to avoid having to put all that extra crap on there and put the thermostat goes up between the cylinders and all this stuff, and the fact that it can stick and ruin the engine, I don't run them anymore. Everybody that I know that around Southern California that builds engines, everybody that I know does not run them. But there's a lot of guys I know. Maybe you're in a country where you're going to drive it in the winter. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're going to do that and you're going to constantly be driving it in the winter, you don't want to keep going out underneath the hood and sliding a piece of wood over and covering the fan up and that sort of thing, then, you know, maybe you'll want to run thermostats. But be aware that occasionally they just stick, and, you know, when it does it, it's like you're not gonna, it's not like you can just do an easy fix on the road or anything. They're kind of hard to get to. You have to pull the engine out to disconnect it, or I don't know. I think you can actually, I don't know. I've never done that before, so I don't know. But you might be able to just take this off and then pull or push on it, jam it somehow. But anyway, I just choose not to run them. That's why. And a lot of guys are going to not like this video, but honestly, it's just, only thing it does is, again, it changes your transition from cold to warmed up. Is going to be a little bit better. okay, and you're talking about 1 minute of your life, or your drive or less, and the chances are that you could possibly have one that gets stuck and you end up with a problem on the road from it. So I don't think it's really worth it, in my opinion. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.